Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Dream Shakers podcast. I'm your host, Stefan Odom, here with my co host.
George Nunez.
And today we have another special guest in the form of Chukwudi, who is currently the founder slash CEO of Humble Brag and an angel investor at Keto Ventures, a fund that seeks to invest in catalysts for positive behavioral shifts for the people of the 21st and 22nd centuries. Chukwudi obtained his undergraduate degree from the University of Binghamton in Industrial and Systems Engineering and recently founded the Binghamton Alumni Angels Investment Group. He has had an extensive set of professional experiences within the world of technology, investing, serving as a venture fellow for Start Zero, Rebel One, and an associate at Gorilla Capital. Most recently, he's been named a 2021 Notley Fellow, where he will be thinking through ways to drive positive change in society alongside other social innovators. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Chuck Woody.
What's up, y'all? Appreciate the intro. Wow, I should get that as my bio, honestly, man. Like that was dope.
How are you feeling, Chukwudi? It's been a while since we spoke, man. I know we got a chance to get on the phone last week, but how were you since everything, since Bing, since COVID? Like, what's going on? How are you feeling this morning?
Man, I'm feeling hyped, bro. It's been a journey. It's really been a journey that's been exciting. Like, both for the family, both for myself. Like, just like going through everything. But I'm thankful for God for how far we've come.
Amen.
Excited, very optimistic about where we can go moving forward, man. Like, that's the hype.
That's
How about y'all?
Yeah. Listen, man, we're good. We're blessed. We're highly favored. Things are finally shifting towards our direction. So can't complain. And I wanted to ask you a serious question. Like, it's been something that's been burning inside. I've always wanted to ask you this. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Hey, man, yo. Bruh, man, everyone been asking me that since I was like 4, man. It's funny you ask me that because I'm the type of guy that just like goes down rabbit holes. Like now I'm like, actually, I don't know the answer to that. At first I was like, bruh, like, man, what do you mean? I mean, that's obviously about my name. Y'all couldn't ask right now. But now I'm like, that's actually an interesting question. Like, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck? Yeah, like I need to figure that out now. I'll get back to you. But yo, you count for that one, man.
all fun, bro. All fun. I actually looked it up. It's actually 700 pounds. 700.
You're lying.
No, it's not 700
hey, let me stop. I'm over here like, let me actually Google this now. Let me stop, Wow, 700 pounds.
Real, bro, real. But like on a serious note, like let's get into your lifestyle, man. Like, you have an interesting upbringing. How was it growing up in Long Island with immigrant parents, having that immigrant background, family from Nigeria? How was that experience in New York meshed with the immigrant culture, and how was it living in Nigeria? Because you spent some time out there as well.
Yeah, man, that's a good question. Like, it definitely at home is like Igbo. My native language is my first language. Before I had an English babysitter who she's the one that reinforced English for me. But like that time, I came to the States in my mother's belly, when she first got here. And like both my parents, they're in healthcare. So growing up, my mom's figuring out her journey of progressing to become an established nurse at North Shore LIJ. Where she initially started off doing temp work at different hospitals, temp jobs off. It was Craigslist. I don't think Craigslist was around that time, but just temp jobs that she could find. Then became a school nurse in Brooklyn. And I used to go to Brooklyn with her, and with I had a Thomas the Tin Can Train little lunchbox thing. I still remember going with her there. And my dad, he had got his PhD. He was working I'm Mount Sinai. And so at home, like, I'm the oldest of three. So I have two younger brothers, we're all like 2 years apart each. And so like, just like home is Nigeria really, man. Like, my parents navigating the world of being, immigrants while like figuring stuff out. We're always sending like clothes, food, resources back home, you know, to family, because majority of our family is back home in Nigeria, specifically in Abia State. And like, it definitely was I mean, my name's not even English, bro. Like, but I, I'm grateful for the experience. It helped me figure out who I am, because initially growing up here in the States, like I actually used to hate my name, fun fact. But then like after going to Nigeria, because I grew up born in Long Island. I forget, it's not New Rochelle, it's closer to that. But born in Long Island and went to school throughout school till 6th grade. 7th to 9th grade, I'm in Nigeria, in Port Harcourt River States, Nigeria, and like really like learn more about my culture, my people, my family there, and really embraced myself and who I am. Then came back from a 9th to 12th grade. Like, and it's really interesting that like the academics from 7th to 9th grade, like I knew Calc 2 and like some advanced sciences by the time I was in 9th grade. And then when I got back to the States, like I saw the extracurriculars were what had the most potential for, enabling growth. So that was really interesting, figuring that out. And then, coming home now, it's like my parents, they're like doctor, lawyer, engineer. Like I still remember 11th grade, I had like 24 hours to pick my major after a school conference of like, yo, like if you're in 11th grade, you need to pick your major. So like I needed to figure out that flow, because I was playing catch up when I got back to the States from 10th to 12th grade. And I chose engineering because I've always been like crafty with my hands and like, building things. And the result was like, me going to college for that. But my college experience, I know we were going into college now. My whole college experience was really just me trying to figure out like, what is it that I really want to do? Because I spent the through line from my extracurriculars, like Model United Nations and international affairs. I was doing that since elementary school, thinking about all the problems in the world, the issues. Having family in Nigeria like cemented that for me, and like seeing the issues there. Like I always knew I wanted to do something about that at a world scale, in different local levels. I didn't know what capacity that looked like. And so my journey to college, I wanted to get away from home, because I'm like, man, this doctor helped. Because I saw my mom go through the entire journey of like, school nurse, and now today she's an associate director at Wyckoff Hospital in Brooklyn. And so I saw that whole journey, and like I knew I wasn't interested. My dad's a pharmacist. I'm not interested. So college, like my whole vibe, it wasn't like the major was just a get in, like getting where I could fit in. Like the whole idea there was like, how can I figure out what is it that I want to do? And it's not me if I'm going too far, but like through that, I was just like, you probably saw my LinkedIn. Not everything I've done is there, of course, because that'd be too much. But like, I was just doing whatever I could, like washing cars. I was a sound engineer. I worked for the University Police Department. I was an athletic event staff. I was an RA. I was a conference assistant over the summer. Started like different clubs. I just got involved in a bunch of stuff because like I'm a very like I can't. I'm the type of cat that can't talk about things they haven't done. And like in order for me to truly understand stuff, I need to either like do like be in that moment and experience it. So because of that experiential orientation, I just had to do things to figure out what is it that I wanted to do to figure out my direction. And my thesis at first was like, I wanted to be Secretary General of the United Nations. Like I wanted to be a big dog at the UN, helping folks around the world. Like I thought that was the easiest way to like, climb the ladder type thing. Easiest way to do that. Oh, and let me take a step back. The first person on the podcast to do that. I'm someone who's very influenced and inspired by like anime and manga, like Japanese anime and manga. That's one through line throughout my like entire life that has inspired me to like pursue the max, like my max potential, because like I was so inspired by seeing folks like, develop themselves, their story, refine themselves, hone themselves to see some go, like the whole idea of like shonen and like what that entails. And that's something that's like inspired, like continues to inspire me every day to like, how can I be better? How can I was never really attracted to like, there's a lot of like, of course, reality shows and sitcoms. Like I was always just jamming on like, Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, all this stuff when I was a kid. And like now, like that has fueled a lot of like, there's an irrational drive in me for like a lot of different things. And just that keeps me pushing forward. That's a piece of it. And so like that kind of fueled my exploration. And then like sophomore year, let me try to wrap up the story. Sophomore year, 2016, I realized I did a summer study program. Like I was selected to be a scholar for the United Nations that summer. I realized the UN is broke. They don't really have the money to maintain long-term engagements of impact. And because they like try to address things and then they have to pull out, situations can get worse. That's how I fell into tech. Because I need, I believe my thesis is public and private partnership creates sustainable change and betters ecosystems, but we need that cash first. I'm not about to go beg billionaires for their cash, like and be succumb to their whims. So like, let me just get my cash up first and my network up first, and then go from there. But that's the. I added a lot of stuff that wasn't technically answer to your question, but kind of like fueled into it. But that's the short version, and college was just the exploration of that short/long version.
How do you get from this general interest in tech to a deeper interest in venture?
Interesting question. I'd say so. Like the rest of college, I just explored tech, like an internet different companies, and it's funny because Relief, I think now they're a B2B platform like ag tech farmers to help organize their goods in Nigeria right now. But he cannot deal with. He reached out to me on LinkedIn for an internship opportunity, which like at first I was like LinkedIn response for something because I got some weird outreach before. I'm like, I'm dubbing this, man. But like after like that internship, I was just like, I need to get in wherever I can to like learn more about tech. And so that was that first internship that I did over the winter of figuring out what I can do. Then I interned over the summer at the Queen's Entrepreneurship Fund, which they were creating a fellowship program to empower Queens College students to look more professional and get more like experiential learning from like corporations. So with the overarching goal of like, how can we like, empower like Queens College, which is like one of the, not, I wouldn't say they're not the highest tier institution of the CUNYs. So a lot of like corporations, a lot of like places don't look for their students for like jobs and opportunities. How can we change that rep? And so that doing like life after Bang, like basically just starting different things, and letting that entrepreneurship bug, like, take me. Netside Draw, my senior project, like we were pitching around the country in 2018. We pitched at the largest science engineering festival, the USA Science and Engineering Festival, doing career consulting for folks and like realizing I can get people jobs at like Fortune 500 companies, at like big tech companies, at the big four accounting firms through just like giving them just the game I've learned from like figuring out for myself. And so like I like was just letting my entrepreneurial bug flow. And then when I graduated, I had an internship at Ernst & Young, but I didn't have the grades to get the full-time offer. I graduated with a 2.8. I got rejected after that. But I heard the term venture capital a couple months before I graduated. And that's where I was like, what is this? And then my whole thing, because like long term, I can't, like right now with Humble Brag, I'm super focused, like a lot more than not as much, more than I thought I would be rather. Because like I'm in the shower at night when I'm going to bed thinking about this, like how can we make, this happen? Whereas normally I like to like spread myself across a bunch of projects. Long term, like I'll be doing like startup studio stuff and like venture initially back, like I thought, consulting or venture is how I can like, do a lot of different things through one path. And so that's where that interest in venture came about. And so that summer, I was helping run a summer school called H Lab, and then I came back and I did my EY internship. And then I came back and just like no job offers, like no nothing, and I like but I went to a bunch of events. Aaron Cohn, a Binghamton alumni, he like really pushed me to just try to get into venture. Before that, Daniel Adianju, one of my fraternity brothers from Elite Fraternity Incorporated, he had exposed me to different tech groupings. So I just like leveraged that, and I was already networking in New York City before then. So I leveraged that and like ended up getting an internship at Venture Out, an international accelerator helping different government innovation arms like bring their founders into the U.S. market. And I landed an internship at Disruptor.vc where I was like sourcing different deals for them. And so that's how I really landed into venture and like started exploring, because I'm an explorer. Like, I'm really like, I'm always curious. I'm always trying to figure out like what's going on. And so like, that's how I got in. With the venture out, like I became chief of staff to the CEO in like 2 months after, getting on as an intern, because like really absorbed and learned so much. Work with a bunch of different governments. Like that was really cool. And also like intimidating, definitely. I'd say definitely like intimidating like the first time around, but like once you get used to that and like mingling, networking, I met so many VCs through that, because it's a platform. Like, it's a platform that like we top entrepreneurs, you know, come in from different countries to, you know, land and expand here in the US. They need to figure out the legal stuff. They need to figure out how to like their pitch and framing them, which is what we did through Accelerator. And then like, you know, they meet investors. And so like I met a bunch of VCs through that, through like just organic networking. And like, you know, that's how I got really more into venture. And over time, like, you know, continue to work, build accelerators and incubators like at Start Ed. I just ended up scouting for funds. So like scouting being, I have deal flow that I see now because I've either worked or met with a lot of founders. Funders always need deal flow. You know, investors are always looking for like, you know, the next big thing. So I'm just sending people to folks who I know, like, yo, actually met so-and-so. I think they'd be a great fit for your portfolio potentially. Y'all should have a conversation, connect, boom, you know, and start doing matching for folks.
So Chuck, you've done a lot of things in tech. You've been active, you've been involved, and we spoke on this on numerous occasions. Talk about your no code experience, right? And what that has been able to, you know, give you as you transition into being an entrepreneur and a founder of Humble Brag and of many other initiatives. Like I know there's like possible tension between people who get into no code versus people who are full-blown engineers. So talk about that whole dynamic and what made you choose that route.
Yeah, no code's exciting, bro. Like, there's so much. And I've rapped with even engineers who are like actually interested in it. But like, how I got started before I even knew it was called no code. When I was working at Start Ed as a program manager, we would use Zapier. And Zapier is a tool that allows you to like, you know, build different integrations between a bunch of different tech tools. Like we would use Zapier to integrate with the form we use to capture like feedback from our mentors, so that would auto populate those inputs into an Excel spreadsheet for us to see at a later date without us having to like pull anything, you know. And it was just like, you know, so intuitive for us to do that. And like now, like I've continued to use that, you know, here at Humble Brag. Like it's great for the operational back end for a lot of things, but even like, you know, I'm starting to see that on the front end, because we actually are building on Bubble, you know, a platform that allows you to basically build products utilizing their no code interface. Think about like Squarespace is like an easy like no code ish solution for like building a website. Bubble's that for building your actual product as a company. And so we're using Bubble to do that. And it's interesting getting feedback from a friend, Murtaza. He's the founder of Heartbeat, a platform for like that people can use to host their community. It's like a combination of Discord, Slack, Notion, and Google Calendar. But he's a full stack like engineer, and like he's actually using Bubble as well for his front end, because like it's so iterative to use Bubble on your front end to like make changes, you know, solution and like create solutions for stuff you need to do quickly. And then you just work on the back end. That's where you just do a little more coding to do that. But like it's honestly amazing. I think like, you know, the argument soon will become like, you know, there's some engineers who are like, you know, like really bearish on it, like are not a fan. But I think like it's a tool to empower like, you know, folks not interested in coding initially to build some cool stuff that may get them like further into their journey of like actually becoming like full stack engineers or specializing in front end, web, mobile, whichever. But even for like companies, like saving time and even money on, you know, like hiring like, you know, full stack folks and like actually looking for like no code operations people, no code engineers who can like, you know, build solutions that make it easy to iterate things internally. You know, and it's an exciting time. And I think like overall, like it'll really, I hesitate to use democratize, like more so like it'll be an enabler and empower for folks who like want to learn more about code but don't know where to start. Because like the thing about, you want people to get like quick wins of like with their curiosity around like, you know, like teaching people how to win and enjoy coding. I think no code's a great place for that. And there's just so much tools around it. Like where I'm at with it, like we're building on Bubble, figuring out like how we can like, you know, really use this tool to build our platform. And we think actually until like our Series A fundraise, like, you know, we're gonna raise a potential seed round in the summer. But we think like we should be good on Bubble till Series A, because the platform is strong enough. Unless we go like viral somehow, if we go viral, we're fucked. Because like Bubble, they can't handle like too much bandwidth at a certain scale. Like we'd have to like double down on the credits for the app and pay a bunch of money for that versus like building our own thing. Like the cost expense like wouldn't make sense then, but it makes sense. And I've seen a lot of companies where they're like, they'll build on Bubble now as a tech founder. And then, maybe during their Series A, that's when they're like, all right, let me actually build an in-house, like the actual platform that I really want to see at scale moving forward. So yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting times. It makes it easier for like, folks like us, like actually build platforms without like having, like my co-founder, she is a self-taught engineer and developer, but like it's easier for like us to build a platform now without like, oh, like, let's get a contractor now or folks in Colombia or wherever to be building stuff for us. So hype for that. It's exciting. Yeah.
Let's stay right there on the topic of venture.
Mm-hmm.
What was your experience like or what was your experience like in Venture for America, right? VFA. And literally break that down for the audience in what Venture for America is. We know that the founder is Andrew Yang, and funny enough, he's running for mayor. But that's neither here nor there. But get into your experience as what it was like for VFA.
Yeah, and like to clarify, it's like I'm technically still in Venture for America right now. In Venture for America, they're a 2-year fellowship for what they define as future founders, folks who would love to start a company someday, but need to like get some experience first. Like you spend 2 years working at a startup, but particularly in like what is defined as an emerging tech hub. So a hub that doesn't have a lot of talent, a hub that doesn't have, they have startups that need talent, but they just need a little something, a missing piece, whether it's funding, talent, or whichever to like help boost and elevate it. Like, in a couple of years, it'll be a really great place. For like Columbus, Ohio, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Baltimore, Philly, like a bunch of places. Like I think there's now 14 different VFA cities that are operating. And so like I joined that to really figure out what my next steps were at the end of 2020. And my experience with that honestly has been phenomenal. Like I enjoyed my training camp experience, but I met what has been great for me is particularly has been like the community that VFA offers, because like people talk all the time about finding like a like-minded group of peers who like share your values, share your beliefs, but particularly your energy. And that's what I wanted from VFA, and I got it. Like I got like a close group of peers who like my roommate George, for example. Like George graduated last year, but like that's my brother, bro. Like that's like we didn't even know each other before COVID, but we were already going through parallel situations of just tired of being home. Family, love our family, but they don't understand the tech game and why we just want this so badly. And like we made this move out to Austin, Texas, which like technically isn't a Venture for America city, but like it's adjacent to San Antonio. And it's a place where like, we just wanted to like start there before moving to San Antonio soon. And then we landed here and we've gotten a lot of opportunity. And like we freelanced our way, like we had no cash. Like George and my savings like basically went to zero for like during the pandemic. Had no cash here. We freelanced our way to getting cash for a 1-month Airbnb out here. I took the Amtrak from New York to Austin, Texas over like a 4-day period. George like packed his car, drove down here, and then we just got to work like making this happen. Like within like 4 weeks, we both got jobs out here, which was really dope. George was working with an advisor who invested in him like 100K into his company to Spotlight. I was working to build NLP models and as their head of customer success for a company called Lingo, an AI risk and compliance company that like helps folks mitigate risk through their digital business communications. And so dope experiences, had a great time. Like I knew nothing about AI before that. And now I know a bunch about it and I built models around it. And so that got all of that was through VFA. And now like that even led me to my company, my first investor. Like my first investor was an intro through George. And it's just so dope, like being able to talk about entrepreneurship. And because like I'm someone who I love to like, have, and I do have like, friends in different types of like backgrounds and interests. Like it's definitely close to my home to like find people who like, align with me on that entrepreneurial bug, particularly with like building like generational wealth through entrepreneurship, both for the family, both for the world. Even on that note, like this is where I found it hard. Like the next level, like humanity's progress, like what does that look like? How do we measure that? And like, what is like, our lives are like baby steps for like that overarching goal. So like Venture for America has been dope. Yeah.
that theme around humanity's progress, the idea that there should be some other social aim that you're doing throughout your career is something that is starting to show through in this interview. And when I looked at your background, I saw that you took part in multiple experiences that were oriented around finding positive outcomes for both a business and a society, right? Whether that was your work as an associate in Matt Morrell's social activism investment vehicle, Guerrilla Capital, right? Or more recently as an angel investor, right? So what spurred this interest in companies that balance profit and purpose? And after your time away from the UN, was that dead to rights going to be the work that you were going to be doing throughout the rest of your career?
Oh, definitely. Like that's for me, that balance between like profit and purpose, that win-win scenario, that's always been the game. That's always been the outcome I've been looking for. It's literally like, like I think about it because I don't know why, like balancing equations in chemistry is coming to mind as the analogy, but like what is the equation? Well, let's say like, X is equal to Y, X is that outcome of profit and purpose together. What is Y actually equal? Like what is the value that makes Y equal to that X is what I've always been trying to figure out throughout my career. That's always been the game. That's like everything I've done. Because like on the outside, it can look like all my work, all that exploration is chaotic and like what is this guy doing? And that's what a lot of people ask me, like, what is the goal here? That's always been the goal. It's just figuring out how can I make that happen, because like I'm really not that, like I'm not like I'm not a main character in like a predefined well-written show that like, oh my god, through like 2 steps he's gonna figure out the equation. So like everything I've done, has had a lens in that. Initially I thought Secretary General of the United Nations would solve all the problems. Was that naive initially? Oh, for sure. But like, just iterating, growing, pivoting, and figuring it out now, and being in this like private sector with that, social impact lens, that's always followed me through the realms of venture, through my journey as a founder, through my journey as an operator, and even like, thankfully starting to angel invest now, with the investments I'm making now. Like it's really, I mean, even like, creating Binghamton's alumni angels group, like the whole idea there is because like me being a founder, like especially a venture backed founder now, like understanding more because I just done my first institutional investment like last week. So now I can say I'm a venture back founder. Um, but like, figuring out like what are the resources to empower folks to do that, because and that's even the whole idea behind my company. Like humble brag, the reason that name comes together because I know dope folks who are thankfully building great things and funders who can fund them. How can we, what's the equation, like what's the behavior that should happen to make, those two groups come together? Because like especially for like black founders, Latin founders, like indigenous folks, anyone who's not basically not a white man from like Stanford, MBA, Yale undergrad, ex Google, ex, let me stop. But you get it, like what's the equation that empowers those folks who like historically do not get the resource allocation to create innovation? And I even tweeted something last night because like one thing I've always wondered, like, do we feel like as a society that we're progressing the right way? Or are we just putting on airs of innovation? Is like the next like really nice fizzy sparkling water, is that innovation? I mean, it tastes great. We would love something better than like regular water, although I love regular water. But like, are we really allocating our efforts to solve the right problems? And it's especially, and one thing I love getting out of the United States. Yeah, I love the fact that my parents sent me to Nigeria because I've always been traveling even before that. And like you need to like clear your head and see fresh perspectives. And I'm a perspective junkie. I love being able to like, and that's why I love my roommate situation. George and I are the same. Basically, we've come to a similar result from different sides of the coin, you know. Even yeah, there's just so many ways that we have the same answer for something, but we come to that through different ways. And like, that's weaving that all back together. Like that's how I'm trying to figure out like how can we get this win-win scenario of like profits and purpose, or even is that even what this should be? Because I just started The Walking Dead like 2 days ago, 10 years later, just in time. But I love like watching stuff like that because like when society resets, it puts me in that mindset of like, what are the fundamental behaviors we should even, and that's why I'm into behavior shifts that we should be having. Like COVID, like there are behavior shifts in healthcare and in the consumer base. biases and like, behaviors, and education, like, how should we really be doing this? There's a lot of like, bureaucratic tape that affects that because of governance and whatnot, but like, what should that even look like? We still have two political parties that are like at the forefront of all the decision making we do. And so like all this, I'm like going on a tangent here, my bad. But like all that leads back into like my thought around like, like what is it that we should be doing?
You're all good. Keep spitting the fire.
Yeah, and my company, and the way now that I think about starting companies is like an answer to a question, and we're using VC scouts, and we define VC scouts as like anyone who has the ability or has access to like deal flow, and deal flow being like, great founders who need funding, but particularly what we define as underestimated founders. So like, women, Black, Latin, Indigenous, folks who are not that stereotype I mentioned before around like white men from like prestigious backgrounds and pedigrees. And the idea is that what if we could like, because people know people, and investors currently have a problem with like even finding deal flow now. Like COVID forced folks to double down on their, because deal flow typically is generated from investors from and I hope I define deal flow. Deal flow being just like a different pipeline and funnel of companies that investors like vet for investment. But deal flow for venture capital investors is like typically generated from their past investments or their existing networks. And that in and of itself is a bias, because like if you're, and that's why we're in the situation we're in, because like if you are just investing in folks that look like you get the problem we have today. And everyone doubled down on that in 2020 because everyone was scared. They like investors, like record levels of capital were raised in 2018 and 2019 by venture capitalists. So they have to deploy that capital over time. They don't know where to go. They don't have like, they can't go to events. They can really like they're virtual, but people are figuring it out. So they double down on their networks. And now everyone is fighting for the same pool of deal flow. They call it proprietary, but it's all the same sources for the most part, except for like, new emerging, investors who are not that archetype, thankfully have more deal flow to invest in underestimated founders, but we're still like less than like 2% of even that funding equation, And so the thesis for Humble Brag is like, what if we created a network of different scouts that aren't in Silicon Valley or the East Coast that know people on the ground, like, in Delaware. Delaware is the first state of the United States. Like Delaware C Corps are the legal structure that a lot of like tech startups use, but there's not a lot of VCs that are actually like active in the Delaware tech startup scene. Like all these different areas, the Midwest, the South, the right next to the Atlantic, the mountains. Like, what if we had the map of all the different startups there and like potential warm intros to those founders for investors? That's like, my thesis around Humble Brag right now. Like, that was something I think would be valuable. And like, if we know all the folks on the ground who are starting things and can plug into that, we can be like, investors, like, here's like the pipeline that you need besides like, your pre-existing network and past investments. These are great folks, that you can easily see on our platform, just invest in them. And we just take a cut out of that. But yeah, and then also empowering those scouts too, because those scouts have been a part of VC for like ever. Like everyone's always referring companies to venture capitalists, but like they don't typically get compensated. Like some people are like I've been in that situation where I've sent like 100 companies to a fund that I wasn't like necessarily like adjacent to, like adjacent being like like some people are contractually scouting for funds. Like I was just sending it to scouts to this person, and like I burnt a lot of social capital with that person. Like social capital being like a founder is connected with them and this person never responds, and then I look like Boo the Fool. Like, oh, like the investors ghosted me, ghosted you. I look like I'm actually not someone who can plug you in and help you get funding. And I want you to get funding. So that's a wasted effort on everyone's part. So yeah. But that's where I stand on that, really. Humble Brag is really my next like initiative for that profit and purpose side of things, and then like everything I build after that will be aligned with that too and stuff. So
And I just have a quick follow-up there, right? Because I came across this term, I coined this term, balancing profit and purpose, during experiences I had at Yale undergrad, right? Or during experiences that I had at Yale during undergrad, thanks to George, who provided that assist and alerted me to the opportunity. But what I saw was that, again, there was multiple ways to go and rethink how companies would leverage the capital they had to have positive effects on society more generally. So the way you just outlined with Humble Brag was one of those examples, but you also mentioned, a bit before earlier on in that response that you think there are other ways that companies can have positive effects too. Where do you think the line really is drawn in regards to how far a company's reach can go?
Honestly, like as like you gotta like let's take like a company like Amazon for example. Amazon has like the influence of Amazon is like easy to just grasp hearing the name. My 1 day shipping for a lot of my products. My Amazon groceries. Getting that like I'm getting staying on other people's groceries from down the hall. Like they're able to like reach a lot of different places here in the United States. Like Bezos is balling, man. He's booming. He's having a great time. He just left. He about to do something else, besides his other projects. And so like you have that much, like, it's capital and influence really. Cause I don't like a lot of investors talk about like proprietary deal flow. And like thinking on the macro scale, like capital at scale is what's proprietary. I don't believe deal flow at scale is proprietary, because it's that capital that really informs your deal flow over time, in my opinion. Tiger Global is one great example of that. That's why they're winning. They can deploy capital faster than folks. Um, but with that in mind, like, it's easy for a company like Amazon to, like, of course, like this Bezos' whole thesis has been like, our profits go right back into R&D for improving whatever we're doing. But they can easily like allocate money to an opportunity fund or whatever to like fund different initiatives. They even through like, their Amazon like shipping, like offer ways to like, with their brand say like, oh, like we're helping X so and so today, whatever. Like it's a choice. It's a predefined choice. Cause like the issue with capitalism is that like everyone's trying to use the most minimal amount of inputs to get the maximum like huge output that they can get using that. Like, someone wants to like input like 1 hour of effort to get like, 100 years worth of outcomes, and that's something that it happens like for a small percentage of people, but because of that small percentage, everyone potentially thinks like, yo, that could be me. But because of that, that's where the issue with the social impact piece is where like now it's an opt-in. Like social impact to some people is something that you have to choose to do. But if you weave that into your organization's like values, DNA, then it's common. It's something that's that's easy to do. Like even like now, and I'm since I'm like in the venture capital scene, I use like venture capital examples. There's a bunch of emerging venture funds like like Rare Breed Ventures, the Community Fund, even Republic right now, where like that social impact piece is like part of like what they offer. Like the deregulation of private securities. Now like different retail investors being like folks who are not maybe as informed as a venture capitalist, but they still have capital, can like invest on Republic. And you don't need to be accredited per se to invest in some companies. Republic is championing that and empowering folks like, like someone like maybe my little brother who like really, he's an investor in public stuff, a bunch of stocks. He's actually balling. Like I found out the other day, man, that cat has 40K in stocks. He started investing like I'm on my podcast, got to shout out my little brother IK, Uzo, what's up? Y'all just realized that. Mom, how you doing, Dad? I'm like I'm on TV right now. But yeah, no, I'm proud of him because like he just did that, and now like if he wanted to get in the venture, he can like figure that out on Republic. There's a lot of like waves that could happen, but that is like part of Republic's business approach. That's not something they have to do. Like it's possible to weave it in to how you generate money. It's just you have to be intentional about that, and that's one way. Like a Republic is one example. Rare Breed, investing in underestimated founders, Lightship Capital. Like there's a lot of ways for you to like do that, but you just have to choose to do that. And I think the issue is that people think that social impact is not profitable, but like there's so much data to support the fact that it is. There's so much, thinking about it. All right, shout out to all the VCs out there. I hope you're watching this. Like this is my plug for like investing in underestimated founders. Think about like innovation. You give a lot of folks who like have the pedigree that will still shit the bed with the funding you do. you know, and like shout out to Plug and Play Ventures, because I think your thesis is interesting, where you just cut checks regardless of everything, because you don't, you know, your Plug and Play is a fund that they're like, you know, we at scale, like you can't really judge whether a company will succeed or not. So you just give people checks and see what happens. And like, oh, like the real game of venture, honestly, if you can operate at a loss, because you will operate at a loss, like cutting checks for as long as you can, until you find that one Uber or that one whatever, and then a couple other companies who like they'll like even you out, but that one knockout that'll return everything, that one knockout, that knockout of the park is all that matters, you know. And that's why like funds at like $1 billion under management, like at that point, like you're Gucci, like you can deploy capital for as long as you need at a loss until you get that winner. That returns your whole portfolio, your entire set of capital, and you can do it all again. You can say I'm great, even though you know it's really just you just cutting checks. And so at the same time, it becomes an intentional aspect of like what innovation do you want to see? And if you're only giving like, you know, capital to folks who have created the same type of innovation for the last like 38 years, I feel like that's a waste, you know, especially because there's just so many different perspectives, you know, because a company is definitely an extension of a person, you know, and their beliefs, their values, their way of perceiving the world. And so empowering folks to build tomorrow by like just deploying capital and underestimated founders is both a lucrative thing and a beneficial thing for the world, because everyone building the tomorrow we want to see is ideally what leads to humanity's progress. It's just really doing that at scale. That's the question, which is why Tiger Global is winning. Let me stop. let me stop it right there. Like I can dive more deep into like that at another time, but like yeah, it's exciting times for venture, you know, because like now you can raise your full seed round, pre-series A on Republic, which I think will continue to be a bigger trend. Larger institutions are getting in on the game from the pre-seed and seed, excuse me. There's different stages of venture capital for the folks listening. There's family and friends / pre-seed, which is like, you know, you're reaching out to mom and dad for money to start a business. And like, you know, if you're from backgrounds like we are, that might not even be possible. My parents did not put any capital for my company. Because like we just don't have the capital to deploy for that. But then also like seed, and like there's like I'm not there's dollar amounts associated with these, but these change like over time. But basically, the early stages of starting a company are defined as pre-seed, seed, and Series A. There's later versions of that, but like those are the ones that I typically focus on. So I'm focused on like, you know, founders who are starting like today, or started like 2 years ago.
You mentioned so much gems. We definitely appreciate that, right? From deploying capital to talking about, you know, getting involved as an angel investor, to also talking about the whole VC model and being comfortable operating at a loss. It's like you have to be comfortable shooting 1 for 10 and being okay. As long as you get that one, then you're fine, right? Just pivoting a little bit, when we spoke on the phone maybe a couple days back, you talked about this humanitarian mindset, and you always had that. I've seen that in you in being, and I'm on the same wavelength, and so is Steph, right? Where did that humanitarian mindset come from, and how, going back to our conversation offline, how do you plan to use tech to impact the world, or even Africa, to so to speak? Because we talked about so many initiatives that you wanted to focus on. So how do you plan to do that? And it's okay if you don't know. It's okay if it's TBD, because we're still young. But so kind of wanted to hear from you.
Definitely. I have an answer that to your first question. Where did that humanitarian like mindset come from? Honestly, I don't know. I think that's just been me, bro. Like, yeah, like, you know, like the early media of like anime and, you know, manga defined like my unlike like that resolve and that, like, you know, that just really irrational instinct to continue like progressing forward, for sure. But like I think the humanitarian side has just always been me, man. Like I think there what, because like even like thinking about like long term, because like bro, like there was a time where I really did not I have the internet. There was a time where I actually didn't like the world. I will say that, right? Like as a child, I had like hated I think this is my elementary school days. Before I discovered MUN, like I was always getting bullied and getting into trouble for fighting bullies. And and like people don't understand my name. They didn't understand. Like, always made fun of Nigeria, like African booty scratchers, all this stuff. I would like deck people and go to the principal's office and get in trouble, at recess, all this stuff. And like I really just didn't like the world. And then there was a conscious decision when I like started MUN and learned more about my family that like I really wanted to change. And I always wanted to change it, of course, because like you don't like something, like why just stick with that? And so I think that's where like, all right, what does this really look like? How do we figure this out? Because despite not like liking things, I was always still curious about stuff, man. Like I figured out where babies came from in third grade, but that was a whole man. Like I remember reading a book about it in the library and watching a documentary on it from the Discovery Channel. And bro, I was really, so I didn't have access to the computer. So I'm over here going to the library, looking for the adult section, like sneaking in, like, where's all this stuff? And I figured it out. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Black clothes, like all this, like the world's fascinating, but like, we need to be more intentional around how we create spaces for ourselves. And that's like, me as a kid, curious, but still, and not liking the way things were. That's, I think, the equation for how the humanitarian came about. As far as like the equation, and say that second question again, like, was it about like, the change I want to make?
Yes. Yep. How do you plan to, because again, we've had these multiple conversations offline, right? Like, how do you plan on going about creating change through tech?
Yeah.
Either in the US or in Nigeria. And by the way, Nigeria is booming in all fronts, from the startup game to the cryptocurrency game. Like, what are your thoughts on all that?
Definitely. Like I'd say it's really focusing on the systemic problems. And like right now I'm focusing on funding. The reason, and like it's interesting, I didn't mention this before, but the reason why I'm doing Humble Brag as a startup and not a fund, although maybe I'll pivot to a fund because like this is only a month and a half in it. But because VCs are not incentivized right now to, regardless of everything I've said, at this time, they're not necessarily incentivized to invest in underestimated founders because, like there's a lot of herd mentality going along. Like not every investor actually is like, luminary, like I wouldn't say luminary enough, but like the captain of their ship 100%. Like there's definitely FOMO, all of that. I think, with these new elements of like large institutions and like, more private, like retail investors coming into play, that'll change the game and like, create more like market tailwinds for like actual change. But a startup at this time is the best vehicle that can do it at scale versus a fund, which will take too much time. But like that's like me going into nuance, but like initially I'm starting with funding. I kind of fell into this, but like I'm starting with funding because like, for innovation to happen at scale, you need to have capital. You need to have capital, you need to have influence. And like when I think about my life, education and like professional development has always been something that I wanted to like, do and have done to empower folks. But like the funding piece is super important. People need to eat, people need to resolve their, and like thinking about like, Maslow's hierarchy, those basic needs. So funding is something that like, weaves into a lot of different things. And I want to address that through Humble Brag. And then later on, there's the education piece. Like a company like On Deck, they're killing it. Creating a universe of like fellowships that basically an online university that, will be ideally a next generation institution that will stand the test of time. And so like, also adding something to that play on a macro scale, specifically Africa focused, is one of my long-term goals. Healthcare is something super important. I even was rapping, because that's something me and the mayor of Austin last night through the Notley Fellowship that we were rapping about, between that and like, homelessness, like, a place to live. Like those, fundamental but systemic issues that are tough to solve. That's what I want to spend my life like, addressing. And then like, everything comes back to like, also like empowering folks to like really be the change. Because like my life, I'm bro, like I have a lot of pride in myself and the stuff I do, but I know I'm a stepping stone, like easily. Like when I was a kid, I already knew. I wanted to be someone that can empower other folks to reach their full potential, even if they can't see it, And I knew that would always be my legacy. And so now, like, this funding piece, the healthcare piece, because you need fund money to do shit. you need like health as well. You need to like be able to like, move your body, feel okay to interacting with the world, through taking care of yourself and being able to take care of yourself through the system. Like the way we do healthcare now is just bullshit, man. Housing as well. Like, there's a bunch of, and man, shout out to San Francisco and Silicon Valley. The first time I went there in 2019, man, cradle of innovation, my ass, honestly. Bro, like there's a lot of dope, there's a lot of dope people in the valley and whatever, but like if the social norm is for you to be stepping into like an In-N-Out burger while a homeless couple is like, sleeping on the floor in front of that, and that's okay, then there's something wrong with and that maybe like that's why y'all are crazy, you don't have this bug, whatever. But that in my mind, man, like when I first saw that after like hosting the accelerator there, I'm like something like y'all are bugging, man. That's wild. And the fact that there's so much money flowing in there, but that is just a norm. Yeah, of course you can like blame the government and all that, but like I mean y'all are constituents too. Let me stop. But like addressing issues like that is my long-term goal. Because bro, like I mean, we're human. You can't preach and talk innovation if like we don't have like basic shit down pat. Our criminal justice system is something else that I definitely want to work on too. And even the way we like, because there's just so much base, and that's why stepping back, I'm like diving into the nuance. Behavioral shift, like the name of the game for me is positive behavioral shifts. That's why I brand on Mikota Ventures the way it is, because like literally, and Mikota and Igbo means strength of the people. How can we like, strengthen our people and empower them to create the change we want to see? That's through behavioral shifts. Like Facebook was a behavioral shift in, how people view themselves, like a lot of like the UI, people don't talk about the UI and UX of Facebook initially being, used as a way for Mark's classmates to like rate all the women in their class, based on their quote unquote hotness level, and how that's affected like, people's behavioral shifts over the last like decade, their mindset, their self-esteem, all of that. And now, the way we view people and ourselves and each other, like that's like definitely affected a bunch of kids, and a bunch of like, people who are now becoming adults as well. We don't talk about that, but like, I want to use tech, because tech is just a tool to just move humanity forward through those behavioral shifts, man. Better consumer behavior, and better, of course, is like something that I have to figure out and define, but like more kind people, more openness, more accepting and inclusive behaviors, there's just so many conversations to be had, and like really collaborating and empowering folks, I think is where I'll cement myself in my journey to like, enable that to happen. That is a long answer. It definitely wasn't a well-structured answer because that just came off rip. But yeah, that's the goal, man. And that's why I do what I do.
Amazing. You touched a bit about this throughout the pod on several occasions, the Notley Fellows. Could you go into that a bit deeper, explain to the audience what the Notley Fellows is, and how those strings of conversations between the mayor of Austin played out?
Yeah, definitely. So like, and this is also like part of the way I live my life too. I'm always trying to like, I'm a facilitator in everything that I do. And so in order to facilitate, you have to have, like, in order to be a facilitator, you have to have something to facilitate. And for me, like, I need relationships that give me ideas that I'm not normally exposed to. The Notley Fellowship is a 2-year fellowship that takes folks who worked in the private sector into a public sector mindset where like, you're actually working around different social impact initiatives in the Austin community. I think it's for folks from age 22 to 35. So you take your private sector experiences and then get on board to projects, around like social impact in Austin. There's different, the Social Justice Accelerator, founded by Preston James, who is dope cat, actually from New York City too. He's one of the folks who welcomed me in Austin. Amazing guy. The God Fund, that is a syndicate investing in Black and Latinx and founders. There's so many initiatives there, and I joined Notley to have more conversations around like social impact that I wasn't having through my existing network organically. And so like it's really like, it's something that forced me to start thinking more and more about that and be able to like, develop more of my theses around that. And so like they have a speaker, like they have a bi-weekly or monthly speaker series. I'm trying to, because it's kind of nuanced now that we're starting to get back to more in-person events. And so we were able to meet the mayor of Austin last night. I went a little late, but like when I came in, we were really talking about like, the homeless crisis in Austin, and the rules around like encampments being utilized to empower folks to act like homeless people to like figure out where they're going to stay, versus like just clearing them off the street and having them giving them nowhere to go. Like they can actually like camp now. That's a norm now, and really like that conversation honestly was really good. Like the mayor, like it's funny because politicians they always have that public persona um around them of like, yeah, like they'll say an opinion and then they'll quickly like say something like, but even though I said that, like I'm not taking shots at nobody, but like Steve Adler is his name, and like he was just he like kind of took that off during the convo, which was really dope, and got a lot of value and insight from it, on just housing here, the idea of like a lot of, if there's a huge influx of people here, and like the effect that'll have in the Austin long term, transportation, basically the whole gambit. And like my whole like goal is like being able to get into more conversations like that where I have access to those people, and Notley, like Dan Graham and Lisa Graham, who like founded Notley, they're just they're a power couple like doing their thing, but B, like they've created a platform that empowers anyone who like connects with their ecosystem to do that, which I'm truly grateful for. I'm actually going to our co-working space after this to like chat with Dan and some other Notley fellows while doing work, which is really dope. And it's cool to see like there are folks there who want to run for office. There are folks who are like tech founders like myself, like building things with the social impact orientation weaved in there, of course. Because like, and I don't, and even random, this is like something I just realized, because I'm always random thought, like, why is it that like social impact and like starting a business are just like, seen as like mutually exclusive? That's like a behavioral shift that was like enforced like sometime. Like, why is it that profits and purpose can't be the same thing? Like there's so many people start businesses to like, give their family something to live off of historically. But nowadays it's like, nah, if you're trying to make profits, like there's no impact piece into it. Random thought, random thought. But I hope I answered your question. That's why I did not lead. It's a dope fellowship. I encourage anyone to apply. I think they'll be opening, they're opening their San Antonio fellowship soon, I believe. Um, but yeah, cool. Right now it's just in Austin, Texas, but they're starting to expand to more cities.
That last point that you just mentioned around, why can't profit and purpose, why they have to be mutually exclusive, is a very real question. It's a question that I've been, trying to think through for some years now, and have been frustrated by the fact that, not many others view it the same way, that, why is this split odd, right? Like, why have we decided that this is just the way things should operate? There is a book that I want to recommend to you. I think it'll be beneficial, especially as you continue to do more and more work in this space, and that's The Practice of Management by Peter Drucker. Very great book, speaks about this in depth. It was written in the 1950s, but essentially he advocates for very much the same things that you're speaking for at this point in time, and that profit is a byproduct of successfully meeting human needs, right? So I think definitely something that you should read into. But in terms of the podcast, we're going to close things out, and we're going to ask you the final question for today. And on that basis, here at Dream Shakerz, we like to pay it forward. We like to provide our audience the means to take this advice and take action, right? So what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to your younger self?
To my younger self, and start doing backflips early. I'm just playing. On the side, I'm into like tumbling and like doing backflips and front flips and all that. But 3 pieces of advice to my younger self. Do more cold outreach. Cold outreach being defined as like cold emails, cold calls, cold Twitter DMs, cold Instagram DMs to people you want to get in touch with. I think that has honestly like really influenced the trajectory of my career so far. And my career is still like I only graduated like 3 years ago. So it's still very, very early. But like that just, leads to a lot of outcomes. Secondly, don't get caught up in the structure of the world currently. And to my point of the Walking Dead before and why I enjoy watching stuff like that, like the world has a perceived structure that adults of today give it, but that's not what it'll be by the time you die. Like it'll be different, it'll be more nuanced. Like there'll be maybe there'll be fundamental changes by then. And like what that means is if you're in college right now, yeah, you go to class, yeah, you need to graduate. Focus on figuring out, what is it you want to do in your purpose more than all the classes and whatnot. And you do, in my opinion, young Kanu, since I'm talking to myself, quote unquote, you do that by talking to dope people and staying friends with them, because it's really your peers who you're surrounded with that define your destiny in the long term for the most part. And then just like exploring different things. A lot of people get caught up in majors be defining their entire college trajectory. Just focus on your purpose. Your major is one vehicle for exploration, but like your extracurriculars, what you do on the day to day, is probably where you find what you need. Like those little detours are a lot of times where you find the things that are most important to you. That's what I aim to do a lot through lab and other stuff I started. And then lastly, give yourself grace. There's a lot of pressure. Like there's a lot, like the issue with society today. Like I think one of the fundamental issues in terms of what we define as success, like ultra success is what people define and say success, but that's not the case at all. Like there's a lot of like, quote unquote average people living like not sexy lifestyles that people think, oh, that's nothing. Like, being a plumber, for example, like plumbers are making racks in Austin, bro. Like there are companies out here making like, calm 4 million doing nothing. Like, there's so many, the media like really chooses what to spotlight, and that influences a lot of folks, a lot of things. Like give yourself grace in that like you don't have to do those things, do what you want to do, and you can be very successful just living your life and doing your own thing. It's really just like figuring out that equation for yourself that gets you the purpose you want to do and the profit. Can it be hard? Hell yeah. But if that's what you want to do, just figure it out. I think that's really it. But like, and I guess let me give one final thing. Um, Really, because that first thing I said about like reaching out, really also double down on like reconnecting with people. I think that's something that a lot of folks don't do. A lot of people don't take the time to catch up with folks they met, folks they like that you had like that your soul had a positive experience with them. Because you think like you're gonna reach out to like maybe a Jay-Z or a Nas and they'll like help you figure your stuff out, or Beyonce, but no, it's actually the people next to you who are growing parallel to you that'll help you in the future. I think so. Yeah, man, there's a lot to say. I mean, I'll leave it at that. And truly appreciate y'all bringing me on here. This is dope. Great to vibe. Meet Steph, George, catch up again. But word. I know there were some times I talked a lot, but yeah, I hope it was valuable. Sometimes I'll just be rambling, man.
No, bro. This was a blessing. We're very honored to have you on the King. Like it's such a pleasure to connect with you. And every time we build, it's like magical. Like we feel the energy in the room. Like we know that like there's some progress being made, and we also know that we expect nothing less of one another just because of the mutual respect. So they always say why kings can't collaborate and why they can't coexist or build. So this has been truly amazing. Thanks, Chukwudi. Appreciate you.